Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't. I am EDJ and we are continuing with Kings and Generals, Caesar series. And so last time we kind of had the setting of the stage, if you would, about basically what's to come, each force, at least numbering in the 100,000s though. You never know with these numbers, right? He mentions probably closer to like 60,000 or whatever. But well, either way, point is, Brutus and Cassius made their moves by invading the island of, Rhodes, and now Augustus and Mark Antony are in Greece and basically now have to give battle, I suppose. So yeah, the stage is set, so let's begin this new phase of the war. So, if you want to watch the original video without me speaking, the link is always down in the description down below. Oh, snap. Take it. I can't put on my glasses, help. So, let's see. Okay. I don't know why I struggled there. What the heck? So, let's get to it. Let's watch the Battle Philippi by the Pope from Kings and Generals.
The assassins of Caesar thought that getting rid of him would allow them to restore the Republic to what it was before. But it was too late, and the assassination only quickened the process of its destruction.
Exactly. It's almost ironic that, in killing Caesar, they thought they were liberating, from tyranny, and then the second triumvirate rose, and you could argue way more tyrannical than what Caesar was doing. At least they're more blatant about it, right? With the purges of Rome, and then this ultimately leads to the empire. So in a weird way, the conspirators and the Republicans have no one to blame but themselves for what happened. And where one Caesar was at least like to show himself not as a tyrant, Augustus, through the second triumvirate is just showing himself straight up. You could look at his purges and be like, yeah, that's tyrannical. And he ultimately makes himself emperor, what they feared Caesar was doing. So, yeah, overall, it's just like, they almost hastened the Republic's end and their own ends by doing all that, which is, I guess, ironic is the appropriate word. Yeah, I guess ironic is the correct word. Either way, yeah, they almost just led to the Republic being completely ruined. So, yeah.
Leading to new civil wars. In our previous episode, we have described how these assassins, who called themselves the Liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius, managed to build a huge army in the eastern regions of Rome. However, their Caesarian enemies, the second triumvirate of Octavian, Antony and Lepidus, built their own forces and were on their way to Greece for the final showdown. Indeed, the Battle of Philippi would decide the fate of Rome. But of course, when we say Rome here, we really mean the successors to the Caesarian and Pompeian party, the Triumvirs and Liberators respectively, both had amassed colossal armies. Many of the legions on both sides had served under Caesar, legions that Caesar had located in the east, likely including the 27th, 31st, 33rd, 36th and 37th, some of whom had been made of Pompeian forces after Pharsalus, and that had later fought with Caesar at Alexandria and at the Nile. The Triumvirs' force, on the other hand, boasted some of Caesar's longest-serving legions, including the 6th, 7th, 8th, and Caesar's favourite, the 10th. Caesar's legions would thus once again determine the fate of the Roman Republic near a small town in the province of Macedonia called Philippi. In August 42 BC, Cassius and Brutus were the ones who held the upper hand. Their army, though smaller than the total force that the Triumvirs could muster, was roughly the same size as the one the Triumvirs had in Greece. Sextus's presence in Sicily ensured that part of the Caesarian fleet would always be pinned, giving Cassius and Brutus naval supremacy in the area. Moreover, the past decades of civil war had effectively drained Italy of much of its money and manpower. Cassius and Brutus, on the other hand, had plenty of both, thanks in part to their campaigns against the Lycians and Rhodians, and also because the East had suffered far less in the previous wars. Lastly, the presence of Mercus and Ahenobarbus in the Adriatic.
Okay, that was an interesting fact. Let me hear that one more time, just to make sure I heard it right.
And Rhodians, and also because the East had suffered far less in the
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering. I asked a question last video. How are they assembling so much men? But yeah, I guess since the East has been not too heavily hurt, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I was wondering, so he answered my question.
Previous wars. Lastly, the presence of Mercus and Ahenobarbus in the Adriatic meant that the Triumvir's supply line was precarious, while Cassius and Brutus's was well secured. They were confident and prepared their forces for the campaign. The two began by securing the loyalties of their legions, paying them a large amount before even beginning the campaign, particularly to any legions that had served under Caesar. Cassius made an impassioned speech to the men, justifying their war. He defended the assassination of Caesar, saying that we could no longer endure that one man should be a law in places of the laws, a sovereign in place of a sovereign people, an autocrat in place of the Senate's authority. Next, he targeted the Triumvirs, condemning their tyrannical actions in Rome, calling them leaders of evil men who proscribe their own brothers, uncles, and guardians first. Finally,
You know, I will admit that, like, when we were covering about the purges in Rome that the Triumvirate was having, I was thinking, like, man, they're kind of giving their opposition, like, you know, a lot of propaganda fuel, I suppose, because of just what they're doing. So it's like, yeah, it could kind of make help Brutus and Cassius seem, like, much better, because they're not the ones going around killing their relatives and everyone in Rome, you know?
He addressed the men who had served under Caesar. Let it give no concern that he has been one of Caesar's soldiers. We were not his soldiers then, but our country's. The pay and the rewards given were not Caesar's, but the Republic's. For the same reason, you are not now the soldiers of Cassius or of Brutus, but of Rome. It was an excellent speech. With their legions' loyalties ensured, the liberators began their march into Greece. But first, they needed to pass the legions of Decadus.
Sorry for the late response, but it really was a good speech. And yeah, they were smart because obviously they're having some of Caesar's men there. It's smart to keep them on your side, you know? So overall, very good. Very good thing. Most of all, make sure there's no mutinying or desertion right off the bat, right? Though I don't know if it'll remain like that forever. That's a good thing to have attended to right away, you know?
In the Corpilian Pass, and Norbanus in the Cirpaean. Cassius, in a brilliant strategic move, sent Tillius Cimber, one of the assassins of Caesar, with one legion to sail around their position, making sure he was seen doing so. Once he had landed, he made a huge show of making a number of camps. Norbanus, fearing that a large force had outflanked him, and that he was in danger of being attacked from two sides, requested Decadus to come to his position so that they could more strongly hold one position. Decadus agreed, marching quickly to Norbanus. The liberators immediately moved through the now abandoned Corpilian Pass. Their feint had worked perfectly.
Dang, good move on their part, man. Like, that was genius. I like the kind of the tactics they're using. There's a lot of deception, but man, is it smart. Like, what a great way of handling that situation without having to lose a single man, right?
Paean Pass was now well defended though, and would be almost impenetrable. Fortunately, Rescupolis knew this land well, and told the Triumvirs of a route around the pass. It would take 4 days over difficult terrain, but with little other option, the liberators accepted the suggestion. Rascus, however, was also aware of this pass, spotted the maneuver, and warned Norbanus of the threat. Realizing that his position...
Yeah, the two brother kings. Yeah, it's like, it's a good thing that they divided, I guess, like, separated, because now it's like both sides could kind of have the same intel, right? From, yeah, that's kind of amazing, honestly. And yeah, I guess now their first move would be to fortify the new pass, since now they're aware of it themselves. So let's see how that plays.
Was now effectively useless. Norbanus withdrew his force in the night, marching to Amphipolis. So far, the liberators had been remarkably successful, bypassing two extremely strong defensive positions without any losses. Knowing that the main triumvir force would be somewhere nearby, Cassius and Brutus prepared their force for battle near Philippi in eastern Macedonia sometime around September 42 BC. They encamped on two sets of hills, linking their two camps with a continuous wall, with an open plain in front of them, forest to their north, gorges and mountains to their rear in the east, and marsh in the south extending to the sea. To their southeast was the port town of Neapolis, which was acting as their supply base. It was an excellent defensive position. Antony, learning of their position and eager for the fight, merged his force with the 8 legions of Norbanus and began marching to Philippi, leaving Octavian, who had been struck with illness in Epidamnus. He encamped on the plain, approximately 1.5 kilometers from the liberators' position. It was an audacious move, his position not having much in terms of natural defenses. Nevertheless, he began the construction of his own fortifications, including palisades, towers, and embankments. For days, the two armies engaged in minor cavalry skirmishes with little effect. Octavian, carried on a litter, arrived at the battle, assuming command of half the army. A close friend of Octavian's, Marcus Vespanius Agrippa,
Heck yeah. I was waiting for Agrippa to be mentioned, but Agrippa, who goes on to be one of the best generals, and often it's said that, Agrippa did the fighting, the main fighting, while Octavian kind of took the credit, or, I kind of view them as, like, a good duo. Octavian was the political mastermind, Agrippa was the talented, commander. Though not to take away from Agrippa, Agrippa could do more than just command. The man was at one point going to be Augustus's heir if Augustus died of illness, I believe. He was also very good at politics in his own right. You could kind of view him as a co-emperor of Augustus in some ways. So, yeah, Agrippa was really talented and could really, I think he could do more than just command, though that was probably his strongest point. And him and Octavian, I believe, were like best friends since a long time. I think maybe childhood, but point is they were friends for almost life. And, I've often thought it's Augustus lucked out with having Agrippa, because Octavian, I don't think, was really much of a commander in the terms of the heavy hitters. His strength was in the politics and background kind of thing. So he lucked out having Agrippa as his man, and thank goodness he did everything he could to keep Agrippa as his friend, because if Agrippa had been like treacherous at all, like there's a chance he could have been a real thorn on Octavian's side. So, it was fortunate Agrippa was pretty loyal, and that Octavian gave him a lot of reasons to remain, aside from their just friendship, I think Agrippa even married Octavian's, daughter, which, I think it's still weird to kind of offer your friend your daughter, obviously, different time, different culture, I know that, it's just, obviously with our modern 21st century perspective, it's a little weird, right? Like when when Julius did that, I'm like, ugh, I just can't imagine having a best friend being like, here, have my daughter, Mary, and now you have to call me father? That's weird, especially when your friend's older, right? Sorry, I'm just doing the the jumps in my head, obviously. Like I said, to me it's just weird, but that's just talking from a 21st century perspective. Things were different back then, you know?
Was likely also in this half of the army, though his precise role is unclear. Determined to force an engagement, Antony marched the army out of camp. Cassius and Brutus also drew their force out of camp, but reluctant to give up the high ground, they refused to engage. They had the better defensive position, and planned to wait until Antony's supplies ran out, starving him into submission. Knowing that he must force a battle soon, Antony sent a detachment of his men to discreetly construct a causeway through the marshes in order to provide a route behind Cassius's defenses. Cassius, upon seeing this, aimed to head off the causeway by extending his fortifications and building a palisade through the marshes. With a significant part of Cassius's force focused on this task, Antony seized the chance to attack on the 3rd of October. He mustered his legions and charged at Cassius's defenses, aiming at the point where the first wall met with this new palisade. It was an incredibly audacious attack, uphill and under missile fire. But with many of Cassius's men caught in the midst of constructing the palisade, Antony's men were able to break through the defenses.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, that was a very bold maneuver. I'll give it to Antony. He's a lot more forward, you know, but like, he could be very effective, and this was interesting. You know, get the men to, you know, be busy building and just go in kind of like I don't know, like just apply so much pressure at one point and break through. That's really bold, but like also kind of cool. I don't, you know, like it looked like it's about to pay off. I guess we'll see if he's beaten back or not, but very bold but effective.
Storming Cassius's camp as Cassius's men tried to rally an organized defense. At the same time, on the other wing, Brutus's half of the army charged across the plain to Octavian's force drawn up in front of their camp. Brutus had not given this order, and it is unclear whether the officers under his command had seized the initiative themselves.
Okay, I was about to say, that seems really dumb, but okay, that wasn't Brutus's call apparently, but I'm like, he had the better defensive position, so I was a little bit baffled he just gave it up. Also, I thought he would want to put some of his force into helping Cassius, right? You know, drive back Mark Antony and resume the defense, but okay. Well, this apparently wasn't his call, so that makes sense.
Or if his men, frustrated at seeing their allies losing, had taken it upon themselves to act. Whatever the cause, Brutus's legions overpowered the 4th Legion on Octavian's flank and turned on the rest, forcing them to retreat back into their own camp. As they did so, a general rout began, with many of Octavian's men being cut down, and Brutus's legions streaming into the camp.
Wow. Okay, wow. I thought that was a really dumb move, but apparently it's working for him really well as well, whoever made the call.
Octavian's tent was found empty, and Octavian would later write that he had been warned in a dream of the attack and escaped. Pliny, far more believably, claims that Octavian was carried into the marshes, where he hid. Either way, Brutus's men had been hugely successful, looting the camp and claiming 3 Legion's eagles in the process. However, Antony had been equally successful. He had repelled charges from the men working on the palisade in the marshes, and completely overrun Cassius's camp, forcing Cassius to retreat to high ground. His men also looted the camp before retreating back to their position. Brutus and Antony's legions crossed the plain at the same time, but due to the distance between them and the huge amount of dust thrown up by the forces, each assumed the other were their allies and did not engage. It was only when the two forces made it to their respective camps that they realized the truth. The first battle
They literally walked past each other, okay. Yeah, I'm always thinking, like, it's easier with the map, but it's like, yeah, these guys are pretty far most of the time, right? Like, there's a lot happening. You know, it's easier with the map and the aerial view of things, but yeah, these guys didn't have that, and sometimes I have to remind myself of that, you know?
The Philippi had ended with both sides having won and lost in different areas of the battlefield. According to Appian, the liberators had lost around 8,000 men, the triumvirs 16,000. Cassius, on the high ground, and seeing his camp overran, assumed the battle was lost. A group of Brutus's cavalry rode to his position to give him the news of their success. However, Cassius instead assumed that they were enemies who were coming to capture him. Not willing to risk being taken prisoner, Cassius ordered his freedman Pindarus to kill him.
Oh my
With his
gosh.
death, the Liberators' army lost one of its most experienced commanders.
Oh my
and total control of
goodness.
the army.
I know that they committed suicide, but I didn't know I just knew that I always thought it was just they lost a decisive battle, but I did not know this was like half and half. Dude literally took his own life when he could have salvaged the situation. Oh, dang. Dang, I did not know that. Let me hear that again. Play that back.
Liberator's army his freedman Pindarus to kill him. With his death, the Liberator's army lost one of its most experienced commanders, and total control of the army passed to Brutus.
Now Brutus is completely on his own. Wow. And his success wasn't even his call, apparently, so... Not to say Brutus has absolutely no talent or that he sucks, it's just... I wonder how he's gonna play it now without the advice of someone a little bit more experienced than him.
The same day, news reached Antony that a fleet under the command of Domitius Calvinus that was transporting 2 legions and supplies across the Adriatic had been destroyed by the Liberator fleet in the area. Antony's supplies would be running out soon, and he needed to force Brutus into a decisive battle. He marched his army out of camp, hoping to tempt Brutus out from his defences, but Brutus held firm. With his force now weakened from the previous battle, however, Brutus tried to consolidate his position by making his defensive perimeter shorter. In doing so, he abandoned a small hill to the south that Cassius had previously garrisoned. Antony immediately seized upon this small advantage, sending 4 legions to take and defend the hill. Over the next few weeks, more and more legions were funneled in this direction, constructing a line of defences parallel to the coast. In a similar style to one of Caesar's favourite tactics, he had seized upon this small advantage and was using it to slowly make his way into a position where he could threaten Brutus's supply line.
Wow, okay, smart move, smart play right here. Taking a book from one of the best. You know, Antony definitely did learn, so now I'm gonna see... Man, Antony is kind of carrying this right now. Octavian just kind of like laying there on his litter, and Antony's kind of carrying the Caesarians right now. But let's see if Brutus can respond.
Brutus made his own fortifications opposite Antony's line. In doing so, he effectively negated his previous strategy of consolidating his position, finding his defensive line being stretched further and further. Brutus's officers, wary of their supply line and being overstretched, became more and more frustrated with him, losing faith in his command ability. They demanded that he take action and give battle, a demand to which Brutus reluctantly gave in, saying, "You have chosen to fight. You have forced me to battle when I would conquer otherwise." He drew his army out of their fortifications and prepared for battle in the classic Roman formation of triple lines, placing himself on the right wing. He also placed more legions on his right wing than in his center and left, stretching the legions on the left to prevent them being surrounded. He was effectively hoping to mimic his legion's success in the previous battle by crushing one flank and then turning on the rest. Antony and Octavian eagerly also drew out their own forces in a triple axis, with Antony on the left and Octavian on the right, their legions evenly distributed throughout. There was little maneuvering or strategy to that battle, both sides crashing into one another. With veterans on both sides, the fighting was particularly brutal. Brutus was slowly winning the fight on his wing, gradually pushing Antony's back. At the same time though, Octavian's men, outnumbering their opponents, were also winning, forcing Brutus's left flank to retreat step by step. Whichever flank broke first would decide the battle. In the end, it was Brutus's left, overstretched and outnumbered, that collapsed first. The first line broke.
So far, the two engagements of this battle have just been one side winning and the other losing. And okay, I'm happy that Octavian's side has done it, because for a while there, it just seemed like Antony was the only one kind of winning, but now Octavian now gets his part, right?
Broke, and then the second, triggering a mass rout of the entire left wing. Octavian's men pressed their advantage, some storming the camp, others falling upon Brutus's center and other wing. Brutus's men, finding themselves almost surrounded, began to break around him. Brutus was able to cut his way out with 4 legions, retreating to nearby high ground, but the battle had been decisively lost. Seeing his death or capture at the hands of his enemies as certain, Brutus ordered his friend Strato to kill him.
Oh my goodness. And yeah, just completely the Pompeian main dudes are gone now.
We do not know the number of casualties on either side, though the tough, infantry-dominant fighting may mean that they were high on both sides. What is known is that the entirety of the Liberator army that had survived the battle surrendered to Antony and Octavian, the legions being divided between the two. Alongside Brutus, many other influential Pompeians had also died in the battle. Marcus Cato, son of the famous rival to Caesar, died fighting heroically to buy time for Brutus to escape, and was reportedly found surrounded by many dead enemies. Antony had also made it a priority of his cavalry to chase the routing enemy, capturing or killing whichever officers and other influential men they could. Cimber, one of the assassins of Caesar, was likely one of these men killed. Philippi marked the end of the Liberators. Out of the main ringleaders of the conspiracy against Caesar, all were gone. Decimus Brutus had been killed by Gallic chieftains on Antony's orders, Trebonius had been executed by Dolabella, and Cassius and Brutus were now both also dead. Cassius had been buried somewhere near Thassos in secret by Brutus, who had been worried that a public funeral would dishearten the men. As for Brutus, Suetonius claims that Antony beheaded his body, planning to display the grisly trophy in front of a statue to Caesar, but that it was lost in a storm crossing the Adriatic. Suetonius is somewhat known for his exaggeration and tall tales, however, and other sources say that Antony treated the body with respect, covering the body in purple, burning it in the Roman custom, and sending the ashes back to Brutus's wife. While much later sources tend to vilify Cassius and Brutus, the Roman sources were often rather torn by the two. On the one hand, they had betrayed and murdered Julius Caesar, a man who was already deified and would be further lauded during the empire as the ancestor of the first emperors. On the other, the two were viewed as brave, virtuous men who had genuinely believed that they had done what was necessary to defend their country. Though Cassius was the assassin who arguably had the most personal reasons for hating Caesar, he had also been a man of principles and was eulogized by Brutus as the last of the Romans. He had fought alongside Pompey, had refused to fight against Pompeians where he had later been taken into service under Caesar, and genuinely considered Caesar a threat to the Republic. The most active member of the conspiracy, it is probable that the assassination of Caesar may well have never happened without him, for better or worse. Appian, in his account, points out how extraordinary it was that the two could win over even ex-soldiers of Caesar and motivate them to fight against both Caesar's right-hand man and...
Yeah, there are good qualities about Cassius. I know we usually just write him off as like, he's just a traitor, but yeah, obviously he's stating here he has some good qualities, and while I don't doubt there is a lot of personal hatred that led to the death of Caesar and these guys to kill him, I do think that there was the idea of you know, keeping the government safe in their own way, I guess, saving it, even though they only hastened his death. So at the end, you know, they were brave and they did try to fight. So there are some good qualities. I'm not just gonna say they completely suck or anything. But yeah, can't doubt that they were brave.
And his son. This should suggest to us that Brutus and Cassius had not been alone in thinking that they truly had the Republic's best interest at heart. At the same time, Appian cannot excuse the assassination, and views Brutus and Cassius as tragic figures, divinely punished by the gods for their sacrilege in attacking Caesar. The resistance against the Triumvirs would continue without Brutus and Cassius, but in Appian's words, none would hold the same glory as attended Brutus and Cassius. The liberators had been destroyed at Philippi, but the Pompeian cause overall still persisted. Sons of some of the original leaders, such as Sextus Pompey and Quintus Labienus, son of the prolific Labienus who had served under Caesar, still resisted the Triumvirs. More importantly, the destruction of the liberators put Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus as the undisputed masters of the Roman world. The three men, who had previously been allied out of common cause, would soon find themselves in conflict with one another. Rome's civil wars would continue. And if you don't want to miss any episodes, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking.
So yeah, that's kind of it, huh? At least while the Pompeian cause continues, I guess the main powerhouses are now all gone, and the main perpetrators of Caesar's demise. So overall, a success, you know, for the Caesarians. And yeah, overall a very interesting battle. But now with the common enemy kind of gone, sure there's Sextus and some other guys, but you know, they're not, at least for now, not too much of, you know, a big issue. So I guess the triumvirates, now that they've kind of gotten rid of their main unifying thing, which was avenging Caesar, you kind of start to see the downfall, which he'll probably get into, you know, in the following videos. Overall, another great presentation of warfare from kings and generals. And I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.